So then, how this came about, we decided maybe since this has never been done before, it might be helpful for people to see it in action. And so I recruited my old buddies, and we did one yesterday. We did not practice it ahead of time. It was all live and authentic, and
It really was.
And it went really, really well. And sure enough, there were some things that came up that's like, whoa, what if we didn't have this meeting? How long would it have gone before we realized this was not happening for some kids? So I think that just really speaks to how powerful these meetings can be in uncovering some little issues early, making sure we're doing what we're supposed to be doing for kids. So in just preparing, thinking, I was Mrs. Principal in the meeting to demonstrate, especially for principals, but we're going to share it with everyone on how these meetings might go. And again, the content will definitely vary by every building, but thinking about the flow. So I had created just like a little template to help me just facilitate the meeting. So this, and we'll talk through this in more depth, and that really was kind of the glue that pulled everything together finally and made the data checklist come to life and not just be like, all right, here's all these things we're supposed to cover. How do we do that? This really just guided the whole meeting. And I really liked that we just put it up on the screen, and principals, classroom teachers, school psych, reading coordinator all saw it up there. And the questions are at the top. So it kind of made that ask the questions instead of any one person. And people knew what was coming next. We were able to get through all three groups in this grade level of looking at the group data first, and then we were able to problem solve both for groups and for some procedural logistical pieces. And it just really made it flow nicely. We tried it with both some of the AELs analyzed ahead of time, not analyzed, compiled ahead of time. And so when I walked in, this was what was on the Google Doc template. So I had one group where it was partially filled in based on the information I had from the AELs. And then I looked at the progress monitoring just to make sure, hey, has that at least started? And then we did that in the meeting for the other two groups. You can do it either way. I think there's pluses and minuses to both. I would just recommend if some of the data is entered and compiled ahead of time, just make sure that analysis is happening with the team. Otherwise, what's the point of these meetings? Because otherwise, we're just going to go back to, yep, I did everything with fidelity, and give yourself a pat on the back and move on. And I think we got some really great strategies and problem solving through that. We also met ahead of time, just reviewed what our norms were. I just let the teachers know this is what we're going to be talking about. Here are some potential questions that might be coming up. We determined our roles, so then as soon as that meeting started, we were flying. And we got it done during their plan time with time to spare. So this is the suggested flow using the template. I'm going to talk through it and point to each step as we get to it on the next slide. So here is the meeting template form. It's totally up to you if you want to use it, but it was extremely helpful for us. So we start off the meeting by going through what the purpose of the meeting is, the norms for the group, what the roles are for everyone, and then how we were going to facilitate, just introducing the agenda for the meeting. Then we just took one line at a time. So we started with the first intervention group. This was a reading mastery group done by an interventionist. We had put the interventionist name and the names of the students on it. Then we just went through line by line and went across the row. So we said, are they getting adequate lesson progress? So we checked on the attendance and accountability logs. How many lessons had they received over how many days? And then we assessed, is that adequate or not? Does it meet the expected criteria? And some of these vary by intervention, so always refer back to the intervention matrix for additional information on that. Then we counted up the session minutes, and then if there was adequate mastery, if there were any mastery checks that had been done for that intervention group or not. There were a few things. This one, for example, we realized, we didn't have a good procedure in place for keeping track of those minutes. It was missing on some of the AELs. So I just put a note down here that we need a procedure to talk about. It was more of a placeholder so that we could stay focused on going through all the group data first. Then we checked in on core for that group, and at that point we talked about, is guided reading happening? Had it started yet? How long was that happening? Who was in the group? And dynamics there. as things come up about maybe there's an attention issue for the group, we would just note that. But again, we didn't do any of that problem solving yet, so we could get through all the groups. Then for the second group, this was a Sound Partners intervention, did the same thing, went through each, analyzed the group data to see if we're making adequate progress for students, and the third group. By that point, we had filled in several notes, but then we hadn't really asked the big questions yet about how is everything going, how is everything fitting together. So that's what I suggest as number 3, is thinking about what's happening for whole group and how is there consistency between whole group, guided reading, and intervention, especially for our students that are struggling already. We want to make that as cohesive as possible, or as intentionally different as possible if intervention is truly focusing on decoding, for example, and we want all the comprehension during guided reading because they might not be getting it in the intervention group, especially like for helps that's just focused on fluency. We need to focus on how are they getting all the big 5. And so that might be a great conversation of just how are things going overall, tell us about whole group instruction and where you see connections or disconnections for students. If there's any enhancements that are needed overall because we see multiple groups not making adequate progress, versus if we need to do anything to specifically differentiate for a specific group. After that, we summarized where we were at and decided as a group where we wanted to put our emphasis for problem solving in case, sometimes you might run out of time, so where is the most important? If there isn't something urgent, or if they're all kind of equal importance, I would suggest you start with any problem solving that they're specific to an element that go across all groups, because then if you change one little logistical scheduling piece procedure, then you're going to impact multiple groups at once. Then we went through and did some problem solving for specific groups that if there was a behavioral issue or attendance issue. So that was helpful. And then by the end of the meeting, we had several notes in each. So after the meeting, I went back through and summarized what are the to-dos, and then how do we use this as our starting off point at the next data review meeting to check back on anything that we said we want to look into, figure out more, follow up on. So that is where I would recommend maybe you start the next meeting right there, and then you could go through this process again. Again, this is just a tool if it's beneficial for you, and if this is a flow that works for you, but it truly helped guide the discussion, make sure we got through all of the group data for all of our groups first, and then problem solved. We were able to finish all of this in less than one block during a teacher's plan time.